He had built an empire, respected across boardrooms and admired by many. But on this flight, none of that mattered. When a simple meal was placed before him, it carried more than just mold. It carried an insult no one could ignore. The passengers around him saw only food, but he felt the sting of something far deeper. What began as quiet humiliation would soon turn into a shocking confrontation. And by the time the plane touched down, the world would learn what happens when silence is no longer an option. David Carter had spent years building his reputation, a man who carried the weight of a global company on his shoulders. As one of the few black CEOs in the corporate world, his life was a constant balance between pressure and pride. He was used to being scrutinized in boardrooms, to having every word and decision analyzed. Yet outside the office, he longed for simplicity, quiet flights, a warm meal, and a moment of rest. This evening, he was on another routine business trip. The airport had been crowded, but he moved through it with the calm of someone who had done it countless times before. The polished shoes, the tailored suit, the briefcase tucked neatly under his arm. Everything about him spoke of discipline and control. To the casual observer, he looked untouchable. But behind that image was a man who had fought through barriers most of his colleagues never faced. Every success carried a shadow. The quiet doubts, the second glances, the moments when respect was not given as freely as it should have been. Still, he carried himself with dignity, never letting the weight of those experiences break him. Settling into his seat, David expected nothing unusual. A quiet flight, a meal, and time to review tomorrow's meeting notes. The hum of the engines felt almost comforting, a temporary escape from the chaos of leadership. But hidden just beyond that routine was a moment waiting to strike, one that would tear through the calm and force him to confront a truth that still haunted society. The flight had settled into its usual rhythm, the soft hum of engines filling the cabin as the attendants prepared meal service. David leaned back in his seat, scrolling through tomorrow's notes, unaware that something far more unsettling was headed his way. When the cart reached his row, the flight attendant placed a tray in front of him without a word. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but the moment he lifted the lid, his eyes froze. The food was not just unappetizing, it was spoiled. The bread was hardened, the fruit bruised to near rot, and the main dish carried a stench that made his stomach tighten. Mold crept across the surface of the meal so obvious it could not have been overlooked. He glanced to his left, then to his right. Other passengers unwrapped fresh, steaming meals, intact, presentable, perfectly normal. His was the only tray that looked deliberately sabotaged. A chill spread through him, a quiet anger mixing with disbelief. Was this a mistake or something much worse? His instincts told him it was intentional. The silence of the flight attendant, the quick shift of her eyes when he looked at her, the way she seemed to hurry past as though nothing had happened. It all felt deliberate. David pressed the call button. Seconds passed before she returned, her smile thin and brittle. When he pointed at the tray, her answer was clipped, dismissive. "That's what we have today," she muttered, as if the sight of spoiled food was nothing unusual. Then she moved away, leaving him with the foul-smelling meal and a growing knot in his chest. The insult was sharp, but the humiliation was sharper. Passengers nearby had noticed. Some whispered. Others looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. David's face burned with the weight of their silence. He thought of the countless times he had worked twice as hard to be treated as an equal, the years of effort to command respect. And yet here he was, mocked, diminished, served moldy food as though his dignity meant nothing. Anger rose in him like fire. He pushed the tray aside, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on the aisle. He could not let this pass. The quiet humiliation had become a public moment, one that demanded an answer. Still, he waited. The flight was hours from landing, and something told him the confrontation ahead would be far greater than a spoiled meal. The calm before the storm was heavy, and David knew the storm was coming. The hours in the air stretched longer than usual, each moment weighted by the foul tray shoved onto his table. David kept his composure, but inside, a storm raged. He thought of letting it go, burying the humiliation the way he had buried so many others. But something inside him refused. Too many times, silence had been expected. Too many times, respect had been denied. Not this time. When the flight attendant returned down the aisle, he stood. His sudden movement turned heads. The cabin, once filled with the quiet shuffle of trays and hushed conversations, went still. He held up the spoiled food for everyone to see, the mold clear, undeniable under the cabin lights. Murmurs broke out among the passengers. Some gasped, others whispered in shock. Phones appeared, cameras ready, the world already watching. David's voice was calm but sharp, cutting through the air. "Would you serve this to anyone else here? Or only to me?" The question hung heavy, impossible to ignore. The attendant shifted uncomfortably, her practiced smile fading, her words fumbling. But her eyes gave her away, cold, defiant, unrepentant. That was the breaking point. His humiliation had transformed into power, and with every eye in the cabin on him, he pressed forward. "I will not be treated as less, not here, not anywhere." His words struck like lightning, shaking the silence that had held so many passengers back. Some nodded in agreement, others muttered their support. The truth was no longer hidden. It was exposed in front of everyone. The attendant turned, flustered, retreating quickly toward the front of the plane. But David remained standing, his presence unshaken, his resolve clear. The balance of the moment had shifted. What began as a quiet insult had become a public reckoning, and the landing ahead would decide how far this reckoning would go. When the wheels touched the runway, the tension in the cabin had not faded. Passengers whispered, some still recording, their eyes following every move. David stood steady, his resolve unshaken. As the seatbelt sign clicked off, the pilot's voice broke the silence. But everyone knew this flight would not end like the others. At the gate, supervisors boarded, alerted by the disturbance midair. The tray was still there, untouched, undeniable proof of the humiliation he had endured. David spoke with calm authority, recounting exactly what had taken place. The faces of the passengers confirmed his story. They had seen it with their own eyes. The flight attendant, once smug, now avoided his gaze, her composure cracking under the weight of exposure. By the time he stepped off the plane, she was escorted away, her actions no longer hidden behind polite smiles and practiced words. For David, it was more than accountability. It was a statement. His voice had carried further than the cabin. It had reached into the silence of those who too often chose to look away. He knew this incident would not erase the countless moments of quiet racism that never made headlines. But this time there had been proof, witnesses, and a choice, to stand or to stay silent. He chose to stand. Yet the deeper impact lingered long after the flight. Success had not shielded him. Wealth had not protected him. In that cabin, he was not a CEO, but another black man facing the sharp edge of prejudice. His story was not unique. It was part of a truth lived by millions. And as the world watched, one question remained, heavy and urgent. How many more times must dignity be stripped away before society finally refuses to accept it?